Professor Flowers, there's several questions regarding calling and the different types of calling. Those called to bring the word, calling to salvation that you were talking about tonight. Can you define the calling specifically again out of Romans 8, 9, specifically 9?
Sure. Again, I think the way you illustrate it is you look at, for example, the parable that I referred to in Matthew 22. And it illustrates the different calls of God for the different purposes of God. He calls some to be His messengers. And notice, all the apostles are from Israel. He calls them from Israel for a reason, because Israel was chosen for that purpose. That's the promise of God that He made in Genesis 12:3, that I will bless all the families of the earth through your seed. And so He has called a people from Israel to take the message to the rest of the world. That's a part of His calling, to deliver His message. That's that first divine calling that I spoke of in my rebuttal. The second is that, again, it's another unconditional choice, that He takes it first to the Jew, but then He sends it to the Gentile. The Jews reject it, in a sense, and they, for the most part, they reject their own messengers, and so it goes to everybody. And the text specifically says, take it to both those who are good and bad. So it's an unconditional choice to send it to everyone. In other words, don't just go to the rich, or don't just go to the moral people. Don't just go to these people. Go to whoever. And notice He's also calling Paul, for example. He calls out Paul not because, for example, Gamaliel or some other Jew at that time or Pharisee was more moral or less moral. He doesn't call out his messengers because of their morality. He's calling them so that the purpose of God's election will stand. In other words, in order for His promise to be fulfilled in electing Israel, to make sure His message is delivered, because He doesn't break His promise. And so He's going to make sure that happens through Israelites. And so that's the calling He's talking about, to get the word to the world. Now, whoever gets that message, the Ninevites get it from Jonah, who's, in a sense, compelled to go through normative means, big fish, blinding light for Paul, normative means, convince the messengers to go. Convincing the messengers to go through normative means does not prove that those who hear the message, some of them have been elected to get irresistible means to make them believe that message. And I think that's where Calvinists make their mistake.
All right. Dr. White, one minute.
I thought that the question was asked, could you explain what calling is in Romans 9? I didn't hear anything about Romans 9. So let me just once again point out to folks, Romans 8:30, those whom He called, these He also justified. The calling, therefore, is the effective call of God unto salvation itself. Then that calling is seen in the elect of God in verse 33 of chapter 8. And then when you trace that through chapter 9, the conclusion then becomes, even we whom He called, not only from amongst Jews, but also among Gentiles. Never has Professor Flowers shown us where that salvific calling to salvation and justification somehow gets shifted so that it's no longer the consistent reading once we get to chapter 9, verse 24. It remains consistent. That doesn't mean that there's not a group of people, all the rest of these things, but if we're looking at Romans 9, it would help to actually go to Romans 9 to see what it says about that particular issue.
All right, thank you.